Good morning, Ohio State fans. Welcome back to the 11 Dubcast for Thursday, November 6th. I'm joined by our all-around beat correspondent, not merely for Ohio State football, but also Ohio State basketball. Our frontline man for Ohio State hoops, Mr. Andy Anders. Andy, the season is tipped off, and I'm looking forward to talking with you about it today. Are you excited about the return of Ohio State basketball?
I am. I think there's some intriguing parts about this team. A lot of unanswered questions, I guess you could say. I think there's a lot of directions this season could go, and I think it'll be kind of exciting to see, even if it doesn't go the best direction.
There's certainly nothing more intriguing than when the opening game has over 200 total points and a school record is broken off the tip. So we'll be sure to get into all of that. Before we do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor at the 11 Dubcast and 11 Warriors this Ohio State season, football season. That would be First Bank of Central Ohio. From game day to work day, First Bank of Central Ohio is proud to support the business owners that keep Central Ohio thriving. They are locally owned, business focused, and always in your corner. Give them a visit at fbcentralohio.com. So, Mr. Andy Anders, it was certainly an interesting opener for Ohio State basketball if you were something of a neutral observer. I have to say I wasn't super familiar with Indiana, Indy, IU, IU
IU
Indy.
Indy.
I was about
Formerly
to say
IUPUI, formerly part of
that,
IUPUI, because that's the name people would recognize more.
and that's what I was going to call them, but then I realized, wait, didn't they get divvied up? And that's not real. So they're not
Yes.
IUPUI. It's just IU Indy. Okay,
Hmm.
IU Indy. So you could probably tell I wasn't too familiar with them before they jumped into this game, so I didn't really know what to expect relative to their play style. There's that joke in Waterboy that they kept playing after Michigan lost to Appalachian State in 2007, where they were referencing about how, yeah, you schedule, some little rinky dink cupcake team like that so you can get a good win off to a first start. So you're thinking, oh, IU Indy, mid major at best. They're not really going to give Ohio State a lot. So it'll be something of a in the way that you were covering the scrimmages before we got into the start of the regular season. This would be something of a scrimmage plus. It certainly was a plus because the game ended 118-102. Yes, Ohio State did concede 102 points to IU Indy, but they also scored 118. And on the way, in addition to some sparkling point totals from various starters, old names and new, they did set a new school record for free throws made in a game. They hit 42 of their 53 attempts from the charity stripe, as you phrased it in your recap. Andy, I'm curious if you're coming away more encouraged or more concerned based on what you saw. You started things off pretty positively, but I'm curious to hear your all around thoughts given there was no shortage of excitement in this opener, but there's certainly a lot to break down and digest given the gaudy final score line here.
Yeah, I think honestly, it was a weird game in terms of that pace, right? That IUND plays at, where it's just constantly up and down the floor. Every shot is early in the shot clock. They're full court pressing the whole time. So the other team is either going to score quick or turn the ball over on a lot of possessions, right? So that's going to manufacture some of the final score. There was 162 possessions in that game, which is a lot, as as people might know who follow those sorts of statistics. But yeah, for me, I walk away having the same concerns I had about this team entering the season, and encouraged by some of the things that I was encouraged by coming into the season, which is like first and foremost, they are going to be better offensively, and I think that's pretty clear from last year. You have Devin Royal, John Mobley Jr., and Bruce Thornton, who were your core three returning from last season to this year's team. Scorers, guys capable of scoring 20 in a night, not going to average that, but Bruce averaged 17.7 last year. He wasn't that far away. Mobley's proven, Royal's proven. Royal is changing positions, but the front court just undeniably better on the offensive end. When you talk about what Christoph Tilly brings, what Brandon Knoll brings, and the complete lack of offensive production from Sean Stewart and Aaron Bradshaw, the two big five-star front court transfers they got last season, It's astounding. Like I believe it was Josh Paloa, who works with us here at 11 Warriors, sent in our Slack that Christoph Tilley is already has already scored 25% of the points that Aaron Bradshaw scored last year in one game. Which is pretty astounding. Like Tilley's offensive game, it was clear on tape, it was clear in the scrimmage, it was clear in this past game. He's a 3-level scorer, which is very rare for a 7-footer in college. He switched the 1-3 he took, and I there was an open practice several weeks ago that I went to for Ohio State basketball, and he was 4 for 5 shooting threes in that, which was really impressive. He had 7 assists against Ohio in that scrimmage, which again, he's doing things a 7-footer doesn't normally do, things an Ohio State 7-footer hasn't done in a long time. The flip side of
I
that,
wouldn't be surprised if he exceeded Aaron Bradshaw's entire assist total from last season in the first game, although you'd have to fact check me on that one.
it wouldn't take a whole lot. I don't think Bradshaw ever had more than 2 in a game, and he was out 10 games. The Aaron Bradshaw story has been told. We're talking about this year's team, of course. I think Christoph, where I am concerned about Christoph and about the entire team, is rebounding and defense. Christoph last season at Santa Clara averaged less than 5 rebounds per game. It was less than 8 rebounds per 40 minutes, which is a worse rate than Devin Royal had last year. He has 6 inches on Devin Royal and was playing in a much weaker conference with less competent bigs. So there was nothing in that. Tilley did have 9 rebounds on Monday, so credit to him for that. Against Ohio, it was not that. I think he had 5. I am concerned about this team's rebounding. When you talk about IU Indy was able to do some things on the offensive glass, Ohio was certainly able to do some things on the offensive glass. And defensively, perimeter defense in particular, when you have a guy who's played power forward his whole career, now moving to small forward this season, and Devin Royal, when you have more size in your lineup is generally a good thing and an upgrade, but maybe there will be some perimeter concerns with this team. IU Indy shot 31.6 from 3 in this game, which wasn't particularly bad defensively, but 50% from the field is. IU Indy had some tough shots in there, but also some open looks where the defense was maybe caught a little out of rotation by the pace. I asked Bruce about that after the game. He didn't chalk it up to the pace. He said that it's little things. They were closing out too hard on guys who didn't shoot as well, or not closing out well enough on guys who do shoot well, or again, just like miscommunication things. It's the first game, and so you expect some of that to improve throughout the course of the season, but you've got a real challenge coming in the Big Ten, and we know how unrelenting a Big Ten schedule can be with the depth of the league in basketball. Not that the top end is necessarily what it used to be, and at least we'll find out throughout the course of the season. But the Big Ten is always relentlessly deep and challenging, and that's proven true for Ohio State in recent years, why they haven't made an NCAA tournament in 4 of them. So I think there were positive signs on the offensive end. The ball movement is so night and day from last year, too. I want to say that as well. But defensively, there's a lot this team has to improve on, and Jake Diebler did acknowledge that in his post-game press conference.
Well, so I guess the follow-up for me would be relative to what IU Indy was trying to do. You alluded to it off the top that they play a very, even in an era where the game is so heavily slanted towards offense, particularly at the professional level, they play an atypical pace of the game, like where you would get a result like this. I guess the comparison I would draw across the athletic department relative to a team like football is it's kind of like when you schedule a Navy or an Army or an Air Force team as an out of conference opponent early in the season, and you're like, oh, great. They're going to play a triple option team to open the week, and then they're never going to see an offense like this the rest of the season. I think especially when you talk about that pace relative to the kind of grindy style that a lot of these Big Ten teams play, where the games are so much lower scoring than against or compared to another major conference like the SEC, it's probably not a game environment that they're going to see themselves in again. So, how much do you think that them kind of looking at IU Indy and say, okay, well, F around and find out in terms of if you want to try to score as many points as possible and you're going to let us take 54 shot attempts and 53 attempts from the free throw line, we will gladly welcome those opportunities and convert as many looks as we can on our way to what is still a 16-point win at the end of the day. How much of this do you think was them just buying into what they knew the game was going to be in their first game of the year against an atypical opponent like this versus what could be potentially big problems for them on one side of the ball or on the glass as they prepare for opponents that can measure up more to the talent level that they have on the roster?
Yeah, to that point, I think there was definitely purpose in scheduling this game for Jake Peebler, knowing the coaching style that he would face, knowing what was coming in with it. Um, I, they want to play at a higher pace this year than they have in the past, and that's been a Jake Diebler like building block of what he wants his program to look like since he got the job before last season. They want to play fast, they want to play aggressive, they want to get a lot more transition going. Bruce Thornton said the same after the game. He said he thinks there will be another game this year where Ohio State scores even more points. We'll see if that happens, but they definitely, I think there was an intent that this game started the season to that point where they get to experience that pace. They also got, some guards, some inexperienced pieces, maybe a chance to see a full court press for all 40 minutes. IU Indy pressed the entire 40 minutes. It was crazy. Kind of like those Bob Huggins West Virginia teams would do, if anyone remembers that. And I also, for another throwback comparison, Loyola back in the day, like 80s, 90s, for people that have seen the 30 for 30 or are familiar with those teams just off rip. Like that's kind of what IU Indy was playing like, right? Um, yes, there was definitely intent to see that pace, to match that pace, to run, maybe to work some more subs into. I wonder if the rotation is going to be as deep throughout the season as it was against IU Indy. I don't imagine so. But defensively, it was like there are real concerns that emerged in this game, right? And it was interesting to look too. I believe in terms of defensive efficiency, this only would have been their eighth worst game last season, which again goes back to the number of possessions and that they weren't like it wasn't the worst defense ever. It was a high pace of the game and not quality defense. But not like abysmally bad, just kind of bad, It's kind of the feeling you get when you look at some of those advanced metrics. And 50% from the field is absolutely something that can't be like a thing throughout the season, right? But um so much of it is the newness and a new group of bodies playing together, and development's just going to be important for this team and figuring those things out. I do think I do think there were issues that were exposed, and it wasn't just the pace, wasn't just this different style of play that they won't see again all year. I think there were some real things in there that Ohio State has issues to work out. But at the same time, to keep running with that, they got a lot of transition buckets. They did a lot of really great things offensively. And you mentioned it's an offensive game. The modern game is offensive. You can win a shootout. I think that's better than being a slow, grindy defensive team in a lot of instances. Now you got to sustain it too. You can't. You got to keep this ball movement, keep this level of shooting up against tougher competition. But yeah, I'm more encouraged than discouraged. But there were real issues that are on the table.
Last thing I want to ask you, and you mentioned this at the end of the recap that you did for the game. Last season and towards the beginning of when, or I guess what was Diebler's interim era before he got the interim tag removed, I had wondered, given Ohio State's roster construction, if it would be better suited for them, particularly last season when they were dealing with some front court absences, whether injury or suspension or otherwise, if they would be more suited to going to small ball style. And you did note in at one point in this game they did experiment with a three guard backcourt briefly. I don't know how long that lasted in the game, but I'm wondering if, based on your observations, if you think that maybe is something that we're going to see more of this year, especially given if there are continued issues with rebounding and I guess defending in the front court, or if it would be better suited for the team to lean more into playing these fast-paced offense, especially if they already have players that are well suited for moving the ball anyway, as you observed in this game at all five positions. Do you think that we could potentially see more small ball lineups for Ohio State this year of the one that they kind of tried to tinker with in this game, assuming that the issues that you identified kind of continue to manifest?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think leaning into your strengths is important. I think a lot of that is what this question gets at of, like, if it's gonna be an issue, defense rebounding anyway, why not lean into what you do well? The thing is, I think Christoph Tilly already kind of does that based on his game. S Again, pending whether the defense and rebounding improves from him, I don't think you're losing the pace, the passing, even some ball handling stuff, having him out there versus other bodies necessarily. Um, but that being said, I do think there's an advantage to the lineup we saw, which was specifically Gabe Cupps, Bruce Thornton, John Mobley Jr. as your three guards, and then it was Devin Royal and Amari Bynum, the freshman, in the front court, with Bynum being the small ball center. So I think whether we see that lineup more is going to depend on Bynum's development. He was inconsistent, looked like a freshman, but a talented freshman in that IU Indy game and against Ohio in the scrimmage and in the practices I've seen of them. Super athletic kid, like the skill set is clearly there. Pretty skilled already for a freshman who's 6'9", I believe. Um, Shoots well, didn't take the shot, the outside shot he took against IU Indy was he had a three that was rushed and forced and not good against IU Indy, but he made some other nice plays. There were some other lapses here and there. It was like he has some growing to do, but I think he can become like a really good contributor, like maybe even the true sixth man for this team by the end of the season. And so if he gets to that level, then yes, I really like the small ball lineup with Devin Royal back at the four where he played his first two seasons and Amari Bynum at the small ball center. I think that does a lot in terms of versatility of what guys can do, dribble driving and doing different things offensively, and the speed and transition, those types of things. Um, I, I just wonder again how much we see it because of. I already think that Tilly is pretty good with passing, with pace, with shooting. Noel is really good in transition, has had some really nice moments in the fast break in those areas. But I like there's definitely some more that you get probably with that, especially in terms of scoring, putting Royal there as a small ball four. He played for the last two seasons. The 6'6" isn't that small for a college power forward, but um, yeah, I think it's definitely something to look into, and a lot of it will depend on how quickly Amari Bynum comes along.
Yeah, if you were 6'6" and a lefty, you could have played center for one of Thad Matta's Ohio State teams, I think.
This is
But yeah,
true.
it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how Jake Diebler continues to tinker with these lineups as the season progresses. Again, we just tipped off early this week, so there's plenty more games to come. I know that there's a healthy sector of the Ohio State fan base that tends to not actually buy all the way into basketball season until we are in football hibernation, if you will, and we're still a little bit of a ways off of that. But for those fully invested in everything Ohio State athletics has to offer, I think it was an encouraging start to the basketball season. You'll be able to catch them again Friday night if you are having trouble waiting out the upcoming Purdue game for the football team on Saturday. You can see Ohio State play another version of Purdue. That would be Purdue Fort Wayne on Friday at 6:30 on Big Ten Network. I'm sure Andy will be providing us all the coverage and insight we need from that game before likely doing double duty this weekend and then going to the Purdue game the very next day, which I will be helping cover for 11 Warriors this weekend as well. So we'll both be busy, but you'll certainly be have your plate full in terms of Ohio State athletics this week, and we appreciate all that you do for keeping us informed, Andy. So thank you very much, and thank you for tuning into the 11 Dubcast. We will be back Friday tomorrow morning with a preview of the game featuring Mr. Ramsey Nasrallah himself. And yeah, we look forward to breaking down what's getting close to a 30-point spread between Ohio State and Purdue. It is one of those very much highly anticipated trips to West Lafayette that Buckeye fans know and love. So hopefully nothing weird happens, but we know given the venue that it's likely that something crazy can pop off. But this team's been pretty consistent. They're number one in the college football playoff rankings for a reason at the moment. So we'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in. And I got to do this quick shameless self plug at the end of the show. If you are one of the few people listening to this that subscribe to UFC Fight Pass, I am on the Gambler's Perspective today that drops later this Thursday. So please look out for that. I know Andy's a big UFC fan, so I'm sure, I don't know
Certainly.
if he's on Fight Pass, but yeah, I figured anybody that's interested in the world of mixed martial arts, you should tune in for that because there's some stuff going on this week that I'm sure you're going to want to hear my perspective and those from the UFC on. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll be back tomorrow with Ramsey Nasrallah. Take care, folks.